In this assault, the Russians made many mistakes, and they paid the price for it. They were so overconfident that they launched their assault carrying red Soviet flags as a symbol of victory. But their overconfidence was their downfall. First, the Ukrainians greeted the enemy column with intense artillery fire, and several shells hit their targets precisely. After a direct hit, the Russian tank came to a halt, and the crew quickly began abandoning the vehicle to avoid a follow-up strike, and that was the right decision. Because just a minute later, another precise shot finished off the tank for good. And as soon as the flames reached the ammunition, we witnessed a spectacular finale. Under the cover of artillery fire, the Ukrainian armed forces began launching dozens of FPV drones, attacking the column from all sides. After several explosions, Russian soldiers panicked, abandoning their vehicles en masse and attempting to flee to the nearest forests to hide from the drones. This tank was supposed to deliver infantry for the upcoming assault. It reached the designated point and began deploying the troops, but FPV drone operators were just waiting for the moment it would stop to strike. Some of the deployed infantry managed to survive and flee into the forest. Instead of covering their soldiers, the tank crew decides they've had enough and attempts to retreat from the battlefield. However, Ukrainian drone operators are not going to let it escape that easily. But the tank turned out to be a tough target, withstanding 3 direct hits before finally coming to a stop. It was only the 4th drone that managed to destroy it completely. Looking at this explosion, it's safe to say that this time, Ukrainians managed to hit a target carrying a large amount of ammunition that would have been used against them. This Russian pair, an armored vehicle accompanied by a tank, attempted to speed across the snowy field. They even managed to withstand several kamikaze drone explosions and evade artillery shells detonating nearby. But in the end, their journey concluded just like their comrades. They managed to reach a small thicket of bushes, but its thin branches were certainly not enough to provide protection, even for infantry. It took multiple drone strikes to stop this pair, but in the end, the equipment was destroyed, and the Soviet flag, which was supposed to symbolize victory, was left fluttering over a pile of scrap metal. While one team of FPV drone pilots was busy hunting in this area, another wasn't sitting idle. A few armored vehicles attempted to flee down the road, but the drones proved to be faster. The first drones delivered a heavy blow, halting the movement of the vehicles. Then the next wave simply finished the job, targeting the most vulnerable points. As a result of this failed assault, the Russians lost more than 10 units of tanks and armored vehicles. This tank and APC tried to break through the Ukrainian defense on another section of the front. However, this time their armor proved to be less resilient, and with almost a single strike, the enemies were destroyed long before they even managed to get close enough to deploy infantry. Some roads and intersections often become hunting grounds for FPV drone operators. There is an ongoing, relentless battle over these key logistical points from both sides. As a result, they gradually turn into true graveyards of military equipment. But when there is no other way, time and again, they have to try to pass through these roads of death. But the Russian command continues to send thousands of soldiers on these bloody assaults, hoping to capture yet another piece of foreign land. Thumbs up to the Ukrainian FPV operators, who bravely defend against a much larger enemy in all weather conditions. However, in winter, when there is no mud and the ground is frozen, the Russians often try to bypass these roads and approach from where they are least expected. But in modern warfare, Staying unnoticed on the battlefield with a large number of reconnaissance drones is practically impossible. It may seem that the Russians don't care for their equipment and often leave it abandoned on the battlefield, but in reality, the equipment is more valuable to them than human lives. With sanctions in place, the production of new tanks and armored vehicles is heavily complicated. That's why Ukrainians are so determined to destroy every piece of equipment, launching as many drones as needed to finish the job. This APC was moving too slowly to even attempt to escape from the launched drone. Perhaps the crew didn't even realize they were already in the crosshairs. Or maybe they hoped that their vehicle's electronic warfare system would protect them. But this time, they were very unlucky. The drone not only got incredibly close, but also managed to hit a vulnerable spot. The result of this masterful strike is what you're witnessing now. The chances that the soldiers inside survived are almost zero. We've seen plenty of videos showing how the Bradley has saved Ukrainian soldiers' lives. And this is yet another striking example. Ukrainian troops in a Bradley IFV were advancing toward Russian positions when the American infantry fighting vehicle took a direct hit from an anti-tank weapon. But it held up. To avoid risking the soldiers and falling into an ambush, the decision was made to retreat. The Bradley provided cover until the troops were safely loaded, then evacuated the group without any losses. Several APCs tried to break through the defense quickly, but paid the price just as fast. One armored vehicle was destroyed by an RPG, while the other two continued moving forward. The damaged armored vehicle stopped near the forest, and infantry began dismounting. A kamikaze drone immediately flew in their direction. The second APC didn't make it much farther and decided to deploy its troops earlier than planned, but at least it had a chance to escape. But he failed. This armored vehicle wasn't lucky either, but this time it wasn't a drone that got it. It was a mine that the Ukrainians had skillfully placed near their positions. Immediately after the explosion, the surviving Russian soldiers rushed to take cover in the nearest shelters, while the second APC simply drove past its stranded comrades and quickly retreated from the battlefield. But without the equipment that burned inside the armored vehicle, surviving the winter under constant Ukrainian attacks will be nearly impossible for them. This vehicle was moving quite fast, but the kamikaze drone still managed to catch up and hit the cargo area. However, despite lacking additional armor, the body held up, and the vehicle even continued moving. But it didn't get far. A large ravine stood in its way, bringing it to a final stop. A little later, another drone operator flew in closer to greet the uninvited guest who had so conveniently lost their way on foreign land. Sometimes, explosions from a simple truck look truly epic, especially when that truck is carrying ammunition. This Russian ground-based remote mining drone also failed to deliver its payload to its intended destination. Most likely, this Russian vehicle was also carrying something explosive. Destroying a target with just one kamikaze drone is always a success, even if the target is just a vehicle. With military equipment, it's usually more difficult. The first hit doesn't always guarantee even stopping the movement of an armored vehicle. But if the vehicle is successfully stopped, the next drone has a much higher chance of calmly approaching the stationary target and either flying into an open hatch or hitting a more vulnerable spot. This abandoned APC is one of the endurance record holders. It withstood more than 5 direct hits to its hull, One drone even managed to fly inside, while another dropped an incendiary projectile onto the hull. And even after that, it still didn't catch fire. This tank also refused to go down easily. Unlike the previous video, only 3 drones were needed to target this vehicle. All 3 kamikaze drones struck highly vulnerable points, yet despite that, it still held on. But even with this ratio, taking out a multi-million-dollar tank using small hunter drones that cost only a few $1,000s is a very profitable exchange. And that's not even counting the likely loss of enemy personnel. Give a thumbs up to the skill of Ukrainian warriors, who have repeatedly proven that even the toughest targets can be destroyed with a little bit of luck on their side. This Russian armored vehicle tried to take a shortcut and quickly cross an open field. Although a drone struck it about halfway through, the driver still managed to get the damaged APC to the nearest tree line and even successfully deploy the infantry. It can be said that the armored vehicle partially fulfilled its mission. It managed to deliver the infantry to the battlefield and even saved their lives from the Ukrainian drone. However, this was still a one-way mission, and the Russians won't be able to return home, even if they wanted to. Just like the previous case, this Russian T-80 tank was never destined to return home. Despite being fairly well protected with anti-drone defenses, it was stopped by one of the remote mines. And then, the drone operators took over. If the APC from the previous video at least managed to deliver the soldiers, this tank didn't even get the chance to take part in the battle. Even after losing around 10,000 tanks and 800,000 soldiers over the past 3 years, Russia does not stop and continues its aggression against Ukraine. We will keep trying to show you the most intense moments of this brutal war.